he had never seen one of those before. So that he went on the Larry King Live show with her x-rays and showed that the pattern of her tumor was the pattern of where the antenna from the cell phone was. Now, the next day, Motorola stock went down by a few points. And 2 days later, the industry held a big press conference. And at that press conference, they reassured the public in no uncertain terms that there were literally thousands of studies that had been done to prove that cell phones were safe and that there was nothing to worry about. And the media said, well, that's good news. Where are the studies? And they didn't have any. And they tried to show the media studies of microwave ovens. And even the media could figure out that you don't put a microwave oven next to the side of your head. So what happened was congressional hearings were called for, and during those congressional hearings, it became clear that cell phones had not been tested for safety, that we had no idea whether or not they were indeed safe. There were 15 million Americans and about 50 million people at the time around the world using cell phones, and we had a problem. So the industry stepped up to the plate and said, we'll put what became $28.5 million into a research fund. And that research fund will be used to study the safety of cell phones. And the deal was that if the government doesn't regulate us until the research is done, then we have a deal. And of course, that deal was struck. This big program was put together. I was the person who they gave the $28.5 million to. We went forward and did work. Now, let's jump ahead to today. Today, we have 2 times 10 to the 9th people using cell phones, which is 10 to the 9th less than a gazillion. Okay? So it's a whole bunch of people. Where's John Williams? You'll get there, partner. Don't worry. So we have 2 billion people now using a technology that we don't yet understand completely about safety. Now, what we know is that radio frequency radiation is unlike any other type of radiation that the human organism has ever seen. So that we have not been able to adapt a compensation mechanism to protect us from electromagnetic radiation. And that is electromagnetic radiation in all 3 effect windows. What we know is that most wireless communication has carrier wave frequencies in the 1900 to 2000 megahertz range. Now, your heart beats at 2 hertz, 2 cycles per second. 1900 megahertz is 1900 million cycles per second. That frequency oscillation is so high that biological tissue cannot recognize it. So that on that basis, radio waves in and of themselves simply pass through human being without doing damage. The problem is that those radio waves don't exist in nature, And the only way they exist in real life is with information on them. With information on them. Now, when I was a young boy, my mother had a clothesline that was on pulleys. So you pull the clothesline and the clothes would go out, and then you pull it back and the clothes would come back in. Now, the way the 1900 megahertz carrier wave works is like that clothesline. It is the clothesline that carries the signal from a cell phone, from a PDA, from a wireless computer hookup to a base station. So that is the clothesline, the carrier wave. But your body can't see the clothesline. Now, when you put clothes on the clothesline, it is the equivalent of putting data packets on a carrier wave. Because it's necessary for information to be interpreted from your cell phone to the person who's answering the phone at the other side. In order for that to happen, information is put in packets, and those packets are put on the carrier wave. And it's the equivalent of having that clothesline full of clothes, and you pull it rapidly. And as it's moving through space, those clothes start to wave back and forth. And that's exactly what happens with the information secondary wave. It begins to oscillate on top of the carrier wave in the hertz range, and that can be recognized by the human body. So that the first take-home point is that the danger comes from information carrying radio waves. Anytime you have a communication device that is sending information somewhere, it is packeted information. And that packeted information forms a secondary wave that is recognized by the body. Now, how is the information recognized? Well, it all goes down to the cell. And the cell membrane has protein sensors on the outside of the cell membrane that vibrate. And when this information carrying wave comes in the vicinity of the vibrating protein, they communicate with each other. It's like the dueling banjos song. The incoming wave goes da-da-da-dum-dum, and then the protein vibrator goes da-da-da-dum-dum, and then the other one goes da-da-da-da-da, and then the protein thing goes da-da-da-da-da, and there's recognition. So that for recognition to happen, you need to have what's called resonance. These need to be vibrating in the same way. But once the recognition happens, the cell membrane has to interpret whether this is good information or bad information. And it has no experience with information carrying radio waves. So it interprets it as a foreign invader. So that you have this recognition on the cell membrane that occurs in milliseconds, just like that. It takes about 3 to 5 seconds for the interpretation to happen. The cell membrane trying to figure out whether this is good or bad. And it always interprets it as bad because it doesn't know what it is. Because those information carrying radio waves do not exist in nature. And when the cell membrane recognizes this as bad, it sends a message to surrounding cells through the microtubules. It says, we're under attack. We're under siege. Protect yourself. We're going to protect ourselves. And one of the things that the cell membrane does is send a message that results in closing down active transport channels.